The story behind Bugatti is a story of success and tragedy. To understand what I'm saying, we have to go back a century ago to the basement of a house in Germany. Ettore Bugatti had just finished building his car, so he decided to leave his job and start up his own company in France. During the next few years, he created some of the fastest and most luxurious cars under his name, becoming one of the best engineers of his time. But despite his success, it all came crashing down overnight when Ettore was forced to give away his company, never knowing what the Bugatti brand had turned out to be. So buckle up, we're going on a journey through Bugatti's incredible rise and fall, and how it returned to become the greatest luxury brand of hypercars we know today. Ettore Bugatti was born on the 15th of September 1881 in Milan, Italy. Raised into a semi-wealthy family, his father, Carlo Bugatti, was an internationally acclaimed furniture and jewelry designer in the city of Milan, while his grandfather was a famous architect and sculptor. This passion and talent for art ran deep in their family, and it was passed down to Ettore's younger brother, Rembrandt. Rembrandt was 3 years younger than Ettore, but was already a prodigious sculptor, even more so than his older brother. Many historians believe Rembrandt's brilliance was the reason why Ettore did not become a sculptor or follow in his family's footsteps. Still, that artistic heritage would manifest itself in a different way. From a young age, it was clear that Ettore was a natural-born engineer. He was so gifted that, even without any formal training, he was already learning complex designs. At the age of 16, Ettore repaired a broken tricycle with ease under his father's eyes. Carlo immediately recognized his son's talent, and so he encouraged Ettore to take an apprenticeship job at Prinetti & Stucci, a factory that was well known at the time for making sewing machines and bicycles. Ettore agreed and joined the factory by the age of 17. A year later, Ettore designed his own motor tricycle while taking part in a competition from Paris to Bordeaux. The motorized tricycle was powered by 2 engines made by De Dion. Letting Ettore work in the Prinetti & Stucci company was a great idea, but it would also open his eyes to a whole new world. A world of mechanical designs, automobiles, and speed. And it was here where Ettore found his calling. In the year 1900, at the age of 19, Ettore left Prinetti & Stucci and set off to build his own car. He was a perfectionist by nature, and he would draw out every single detail of his automobile design, from the engine to the body parts of the car. He also supervised the creation of all the parts that were used in the making of his car. This became a ritual throughout his lifetime. He was a very precise man, detailed and mathematical, so much so that some of his designs seemed too complex for even the most established engineers of his time. His talent eventually caught the attention of the D. Dietrich Company, which had factories in both France and Germany. Ettore was frequently hired by the company to build and design vehicles for them. In spite of his young age, he received his first professional contract when he was only 19. And because he was still a minor, his father had to co-sign the contract for him. For this job, Ettore had to move away from his birthplace in Milan to Niederbronn-les-Bains, a town in Germany. There, he worked for a few years learning more about his craft, developing automobiles, and even entering car races. In 1903, he built his second car for the Paris-Madrid race, but this car was so ahead of its time that it wasn't even permitted to race. Ettore placed both the driver and the engine low in the chassis of the car, because he believed doing this was best for the center of gravity and aerodynamics. However, everyone else found it weird. After all, every other car designer at the time believed that being seated higher was the correct way. But soon enough, this style would later become the norm among race cars. In 1906, Ettore decided it was time to leave De Dietrich. Around this time, the automobiles of that era were built one at a time by extremely skilled craftsmen, so they were very expensive, and generally only the very wealthy could afford them. Most of the time, the cars were used for racing, which was quickly becoming a popular sport across Europe and America. In 1907, Ettore met Barbara Giuseppina Maschera, who would later become his wife. That same year, Ettore signed a multi-year contract with a gasoline engine manufacturer, Deutz, in Cologne, Germany. During his time at Deutz, Ettore was creating larger-scale and heavier-duty engines for the company, which was the norm at the time. But by then, he had developed his own ideas about building his engines, ideas that would directly contradict the trends of that period in time. Ettore believed that building an extremely lightweight vehicle, one that would be both small and lightweight, was very possible, and that such a car would outperform other cars with much bigger engines. To do this, he began working on a new automobile in the basement of his house, and this new car would be the first to bear the Bugatti name, the Bugatti Type 10. The Type 10 was finally completed in 1909. The result was a 1.2-liter, 4-cylinder engine weighing only 365 kilograms. This two-seater vehicle was capable of reaching a top speed of 80 kilometers per hour, which was an incredible feat at the time. By now, he decided to quit his job and drove his newly built car to the Alsatian town of Molsheim, where he founded his own company, the Automobiles Ettore Bugatti. Ettore was one of the first people to use racing competitions as a platform to demonstrate the abilities of his cars. Doing this in front of a large crowd helped increase his popularity as one of the best car designers in the country. This practice soon became a norm in the car industry. 1909 was a significant year in Bugatti's life, and one of his happiest. It was the year he completed the Type 10, founded his company, and most importantly, it was the same year he welcomed his first son, Jean Bugatti, into the world. Despite the Bugatti Type 10 being a brilliant car and far ahead of its time, Ettore saw room for even greater improvement, and the Type 10 would serve as the prototype for one of the most popular cars in the automobile industry, the Type 13. Bugatti improved the design of its predecessor by adding leaf springs to the rear axle and adopting 4 valves per cylinder to create a 16-valve cylinder head design. This meant that the new Type 13 produced an adequate 30 horsepower to power the 300-kilogram chassis. Bugatti and its new car went on to take a respectable second place in the 1911 French Grand Prix, further cementing Bugatti's name as one of the best car designers in the world. Bugatti continued to work on other models based on his same engine design as the Type 13, all the way to the Type 23. However, the whole world stopped, and so did the production of his cars when the First World War broke out. After seeing that the war went on for a year and a half, Ettore had no choice but to move back to Milan and then to Paris, where he worked with the Duesenberg brothers between 1915 and 1916. He proposed the dramatic U16 engine, which was essentially 2 straight-line engines sharing a crankcase, and called it the Bugatti U16. The U16 itself wasn't particularly successful, but it led both Bugatti and the Duesenberg brothers to create the overhead camshaft and straight-8 engine designs. After the war ended, Ettore moved back to Molsheim, which by this time had now become French territory, and continued to build lightweight sports cars. He shaped the Type 13 with a multi-valve engine, and the result was incredible. His new car gave him victories at the 1920 Le Mans. In 1921, the car won at Brescia, winning another 3 more times after this, and soon enough, the car was known as the Bugatti Type 13 Brescia. The winning streak continued to 1925, and by this point, his cars had amassed over 400 victories. 2,000 prototypes of the Bugatti Type 13 Brescia were built before 1926, making it one of the most successful Bugatti cars ever made. In 1924, Ettore presented his Bugatti Type 35 at the Grand Prix in Lyon, and his new car quickly became Bugatti's most successful racing model, winning over 1,000 races during its lifetime. Racing successes continued well into the 1930s for Bugatti, most notably an astonishing 2 wins at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in both 1937 and 1939, with the latter race being piloted by a name that would later become synonymous with the car maker, Pierre Véron. After experimenting with different models of race cars, Ettore and his first son, Gene